Hi everyone, just wanted to go over some of the information from last week, the quiz and a little bit of content, and then talk a little bit about this week, week 4. So last week we kind of continued our discussion of external analysis with a specific focus on the service area competitor analysis. So this is where we're not just looking at the overall kind of overarching external environment. So we're not looking at everything in the external environment, like the external environment is going to include things like regulatory, government, providers that aren't necessarily your competitors, etc. And the service area competitor analysis is very focused on just your competition and how what is your service area. Who's within that, what types of services are they providing, etc. We'll talk a little bit more about it through the quiz questions. There are a couple quiz questions that hopefully will focus our discussion a little bit more. But we also this week had a case study assignment, so hopefully you found that to be interesting. I haven't started reviewing them yet. I'll get in there to review them. But what I did notice was that not everyone had uploaded the self and peer assessment, so I did send that back out yesterday. I apologize for the confusion. I should have been specific in that to email it to me if you hadn't uploaded it with your assignment, because once you submit an assignment, you can't submit again. So if you didn't upload it with your assignment, it would need to come to me separately. But if you uploaded it with your assignment, you should be all set. I haven't gone in to see how many I've gotten. I know that I received one this morning, but I haven't gone in to see how many we're missing still at this point. But so if you haven't completed it, I can't do the grading until I get everybody's, or I can't submit the grading to Blackboard. So please make sure that you submit that assignment to me via email. We also talked a little bit about Porter's 5 Forces framework and the Flipgrid, and really the question that I was asking in a couple of the different posts was specific to the 5 forces framework, or the 5 forces analysis, or force field analysis, sometimes it's called, that as compared to a SWOT analysis. So hopefully you've had exposure to a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when you look at a SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses are based on your internal environment, so the things that we are looking at this week. But that opportunities and threats portion is really focused on that external analysis, and what I was getting at with those questions was, what does the Porter's 5 Forces framework bring to us that a SWOT doesn't? And it's really a lot more detailed, obviously, and especially with regard to competitor and competitor dynamics. So using the Porter 5 Forces framework can really give us a better picture of not just our external environment and where our opportunities and threats are, but also how they impact us, how they interact with one another, etc. Can really provide us with a little more detail there. So, but know that a lot of times an organization, especially at the more general level, unless you're actually working very diligently on strategic planning on a committee or a workforce of some sort, sometimes a SWOT analysis is the approach that will be taken. So know that they are sometimes used somewhat interchangeably, but it's really more about the detail and the level of detail that we go into with the force field analysis versus a SWOT. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about quiz questions. The first one, unfortunately, I have to apologize. You guys probably think I'm a giant bonehead. Seems like it's been that way this term. But the answer that was in the classroom as the correct answer was marked wrong. So it defaulted to the top answer instead of actually choosing the right answer. So I did go in and regrade it based on the correct answer. And the question was, which of the following is not an indicator of bargaining power of a customer or buyer group? And so that overall, the original answer was concentrates purchases in an industry, and that's certainly not the correct answer. That is something that is an indicator of the bargaining power or buying power of a group. But one of the things that is not is earns high profits. So actually, if there's a whole listing in the textbook, it talks specifically about low profits, really giving those customers buying power. So you think about that generally, we as buyers, let's say we're a buyer, we're a customer, a patient, if we were to go to an organization that was having some financial difficulty, had low profits, etc., we may get a better deal from them. And you think about that in the healthcare setting, but think about it in the general setting. So if you go to an organization that's maybe struggling a little bit in the retail sector, you're probably going to get some good deals because they're looking to push merchandise. And it's really no different in the healthcare sector. Organizations that are struggling financially may offer some opportunity to receive care, receive extra services like maybe wellness services, etc., to try and draw patients in. So earning high profits is not going to give bargaining power to the buyer. It actually gives that power to the actual seller in those cases. So that has been corrected. So if you had, you may see a change in your quiz score if you had gotten that one wrong, but it was really right. So I apologize for that. Next question. Service area competitor analysis begins with assessing service area competitive dynamics. The answer to that is false. Actually, the first thing, our chapter that we read this week laid out a very specific series of steps on how you manage service area competitor analysis. And it really starts, step one is examining your external environment, your external environmental analysis that you've completed. So you're really going to take a look at that first, and then move into digging in on the competitors. And there, I think step 3 and step 6 or something were very specific to competitive dynamics. But the first step is always going to be to take a look at our external environmental analysis that we've completed already. Next question. In addition to defining its service area, an organization must analyze and detail relevant and important aspects of the service area, including, and there were several answers, but the correct answer was economic, demographic, psychographic, and disease pattern characteristics. So not only do we want to say, okay, here is our general service area that we operate in, and this would be part of your external environment analysis, that very first step that you've likely already completed, and now you're just taking a look at it. So you're not only going to look at your things like government and regulatory or competitors or providers that aren't competitors, etc. But you also need to look at the economics of the area, demographics, lifestyle-related issues, disease patterns. Those will all have an impact on how your organization will be able to proceed moving forward, and are a very important element of that external environmental analysis. So economic, demographic, psychographic, and disease pattern characteristics do need to be analyzed in detail. Next question. I think this might be the last one. Yeah, this is the last one. So organizations that compete in several different markets will find that their competitors in one of their markets will be the same as in all markets. And that was a true-false question. That's false. So keep in mind that sometimes, let's say you're an organization that's competing in several different markets. So you have lots of different services that you provide, and that your service area may be the same, but you're providing maybe physician services, hospital services, ambulatory surgery, walk-in services, emergency, all these different services, different markets that you're competing in, and what you might find is that maybe you are an organization that has many service areas, many markets, but your competitors really focus on that one area. So a good example could be, let's say, I'm not sure, I'm assuming AHN probably has walk-in clinics, but I know that UPMC does. So an urgent care clinic is just one element of many things that UPMC does. Obviously, most of us know that live in this area. However, if you look at a competitor, now the competitor that that comes to mind immediately is MedExpress. So MedExpress is a direct competitor to UPMC with regard to urgent care services. However, it doesn't mean that they're going to be a competitor to UPMC with regard to ambulatory surgery or hospital services, or maybe services outside a certain service area, because MedExpress there are lots of them. So they tend to focus on small service areas based on their surrounding community. So if you compete in several markets, your competitors in one market may be very different than your competitors in another market. And that's why it's important, as we're doing this competitive analysis, that we are engaging all of our markets to make sure that we assess and identify competitors and competitive dynamics across the continuum of all of our markets. So in strategic planning, specifically, these aspects are quite complex in a very large integrated health system. They're not quite as complex in someone that focuses only on a single market, a single service area. So hopefully that makes sense. But just think about that example where an organization may just do one thing, or they may do a ton of different things, and that will impact who your competitors are and how they interact with you throughout the continuum of the healthcare setting. So that's all I have for the quiz questions. If there are any questions on other items that I didn't review, please just let me know. So this week we're going to transition out of the external world and into the internal world. So we're going to look at internal environmental analysis, and we're going to look at competitive advantage. So now we're looking at, what are our strengths and what gives us competitive advantage over others that are our competitors overall. So a good example can go back to that UPMC MedExpress example. So if a person goes to MedExpress, they don't have that automatic larger network of providers and services that are contiguous to your organization. So at UPMC, you go to a walk-in or an urgent care center, and if need be, they can refer you to specialists in their organization. They can refer you for other services within UPMC very easily because it's within the organization. MedExpress has to actually work harder to do that because they don't own specialists. They don't own hospitals. They don't own those facilities. So that's a good example of what is our competitive advantage. It could be that we have access to a whole specialty network, or we have access to a whole cadre of services that right at our fingertips, and makes it easier for the patient that perhaps a standalone private physician practice or a standalone urgent care does not have. So that's where you can determine those elements of competitive advantage. The other thing that is very important for competitive advantage and just overall within your organization is analyzing where your strengths are. So your competitive advantage in an organization, let's say an organization like a standalone physician practice, your competitive advantage may be that you can provide more personalized service, that you can provide maybe a patient-centered medical home environment. You can focus on things that when you're a part of a larger system, you may not be able to do. So analyzing what are your strengths, but then also your weaknesses as an organization is a very important element of what we do in an internal environmental analysis. So for our discussion, we're talking about objective and subjective strengths and weaknesses. And if you can talk about your organization, that's great. But if you're not working in the healthcare setting, or you could even, if you're working somewhere, maybe it's not healthcare, you could talk about strengths and weaknesses in your organization. So that's feel free to share whatever is appropriate, or you can just choose an organization and based on your observation, what would be some of those objective and subjective strengths and weaknesses. We also have a written assignment this week about competitive advantage and what strength or weakness is the most important in a healthcare organization based on your, what you've examined and your research throughout the week. So that is our written assignment for this week. Again, please be sure to submit, if you haven't already, please submit those self and peer assessments from last week's assignment. I can't post the grading for the assignment until I have everyone's assessments. Also, please be sure to go in and take a look at your feedback from your topic suggestions. Some really great ideas for topics for your final papers. I'm really excited to see how they progress. And next week, I think it is, you have the option of submitting a draft. It is not a required assignment. Some students would rather not do that. I would encourage you to start working on your final paper as soon as possible, because it is a sizable project. It's not the kind of thing you can do on Saturday afternoon when it's due on Sunday. It is a fairly sizable project, but if you wanted to submit a draft or even an outline for me to take a look at for next week, like I said, it's not a requirement, it's not graded, there's no extra credit for submitting it, anything like that. I don't do extra credit, but I'm happy to take a look at your path and where you're going with things. One of the things that I find with this particular assignment is that people are not they're looking at it as just a business plan, and you really need to take a look at not just here's where we can make some money and here's where I think it's going to help our organization. It's a strategic business plan. So all of those elements of environmental analysis, both internal, external, all of those pieces are part of this assignment. So please make sure that you can that you address those. And that's probably the biggest feedback I end up giving, is that it looks like your plan of where your strategy is going is in good shape, but you're missing some of these other elements. The other question I sometimes get is with regard to the finances. You don't need to do a massive financial analysis. What I would encourage you, though, is to look at how much this is going to cost generally to implement. If there's no cost, that's fine. And also, be sure to check out most of the things that people are thinking about doing have been done before in other organizations. So you may be able to find some either scholarly research on the topic or maybe white papers. And I did suggest that to some of you. There's probably a white paper out there, and that may help you with the financial piece, because they may be able to say, well, in our organization, we saved $1 million in a year by doing this particular thing, or we were able to increase revenue by this much by doing this thing. So please be sure to take a look and see what types of other research has been done, either kind of business research or white papers, case studies, or scholarly research. You may find some of that out there as well, and make sure that it looks reliable and is something that you would trust. That's an important piece as well. And if you're not sure, please feel free to forward it to me. I'd be happy to take a look at it and give you my thoughts on it as well. So that's all I have. Look forward to seeing everyone this week in the Flipgrid. And getting everyone's self-peer assessments back if you haven't uploaded them already to the classroom. And any other questions on any of the quiz or anything else we've got going on, please just let me know. Thanks so much.